It's Zach the Brat, bitch. Do you know what? I feel so out of my depth. Like, see, already I'm stumbling my words. Like, there's no audience, there's no chat. It's literally just me, you, and us. Like, I'm sat here now at my desk. Like, I've got thousands of notes surrounding me. Like, you guys literally know how much I've been wanting to do this podcast, and I can't believe it's finally here. Oh, I'm one of those people. You build so much expectations on yourself, and you're your own worst critic, and nothing is ever goes to plan or is ever good enough. So I'm sat here. The day is Sunday, and if you're listening to this now, it is Wednesday, the 11th of September, which is my mum's birthday. And I'm going to take you guys back to the very beginning. Back to the very beginning. So it all started on the 29th of October, 1987. A young prince was born, a young, handsome prince with blonde locks, blue eyes, and little did his mother know that he would turn into the Antichrist. Yes, she named him Zach, not Lucifer or Jesus. Zachary. Very biblical name, if you will. Very biblical name. Absolutely. We'll have all the biblical names. He was an icon. He was a superstar. I'm taking the piss, starting it like it's a fairy tale. But I'm going to take you back to the beginning of where it first began for me. So I grew up in a town called Hatfield. How could I describe Hatfield to you? Hatfield, think Chatsworth Estate, think Shameless, think a mini Luton. If you're listening internationally from America or Australia, if you're Australian, the bush. If you're American, the deep south. That's where I grew up on, like a trailer park kid, essentially, but not in a trailer park. We have a thing called a council house, which is like state housing. But my mum, bless her, she worked bloody hard to give me the life that I needed. And I wasn't an easy child. Back in the 90s, I've got a neurodivergence called ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. But back in the day, in the good old 90s, you were just a naughty kid. You were just labelled as a naughty kid. So my mum was a single parent. My dad was an absolute waste of space. Absolute waste of space. No room at the inn for Papa Bear. No. So she did the best that she could. I was a very extrovert child. Very extrovert child. Like, listen. There weren't no secret that I was going to grow up to be a big absolute pufter. Do you know what I mean? I'd wear my auntie's purple suede shoes with a 2-inch heel. I'd have my little dungarees on. But as a kid, I was very bratty. Hence the name Zach the Brat. I was born a brat, I'll die a brat. Brat till I die. Charlie XCX, if you're listening to this, you will be hearing from my lawyers about your Brat Summer and your Brat album. Thank you very much, because I was the first brat on this planet, and I do believe I'm a few years older than you as well, bitch. But no, in all seriousness, I wasn't the most easiest child. I was very headstrong from a very young age. I had an answer for everything. A lot of people didn't really know how to take me. They just thought I was like a smart ass kid. I very much ruled the roost, you know. I used to do things my way. I was just a very, very independent kid. And being a kid in the 90s with ADHD, for me, it was very... like social situations I'd find really overwhelming. I didn't really know how to like communicate with other kids and stuff. So I used to be a little shit. I was a little shit. I remember one time in nursery, there was this girl, she was called Hannah, and I grew up with her, and she was playing in the telephone box. And I remember I just went up to her, yanked her hair out of the telephone box, yeeted her around the school. Honestly, I should have laughed, because if this was my kid, oh my God, I'd be mortified. But communicating for me was quite hard because I was such a extrovert child. I never used to get invited to like parties. And I wasn't too much of a problem child. Like I wasn't like aggressive. I wasn't anything like that. I just loved to play. I loved to perform. Like I would always be the kid that was dancing. And my mum, she always encouraged my creativity as well. And but when I was younger, there was a times when I wouldn't get invited to the parties, and my mum was a lesbian, so I wasn't, obviously didn't know this at the time. So when I grew up, I lived with my mum and her girlfriend, and it was quite taboo back then, having gay parents. So for me, I never saw any kissing, never saw any affection. I never saw them sleep in a bed together. They had two separate beds in my mum's main room. And it was just, I was brought up with Auntie Janet. That was me, Auntie Janet and mum, and it was like mum's friend. But obviously the neighbours, people at the school knew. So for me, a lot of parents as well, they wouldn't invite me because I was this massively flamboyant kid, but also because my mum was gay as well. So there was, like, I don't know that for certain, but it was a case of, oh, the numbers, we've got too many numbers. We'd love to have Zach and blah, blah, blah. And, looking back now, you don't realise it when you're younger, but I think you sort of put the pieces of the jigsaw together, don't you, when you're older, and you start to figure life out and you start to understand where your parents are coming from or what they've been through. So for me, I was pushed out from social circles from a very early age. And there was always that fear of missing out and wondering, oh, why can't I be like the other kids? Essentially, you like the cool kids. Why can't I hang around with the cool kids? Like, is it me? So my insecurities and my confidence was chipped at, and I was losing it as the older I was getting. So I used to act out. And it was like I had an identity crisis from quite a young age because I couldn't understand why people didn't want to play with me, invite me to parties, but that was all down to the parents. So I found my outlet with music. Like growing up, I've always loved music. Like my mum used to listen to music. She used to listen to it all the time, like Simply Red, SWV, Eternal, TLC, the Fugees, Mary J. Blige, Janet Jackson, like you name it, Hev had it. Hev had the albums. She used to have it, hundreds. And I remember she had this little wooden cabinet and it had all her CDs in it. She used to go nuts at me because I'd always used to scratch the CDs. And that was my thing. That was where I connected. That was my social life, music. And that's where I started to look deeper into it. And I was like, what else goes with this? This is nice. Is there a package? Can I get this in a package? Like, you discover music videos and for me, it was like you go from song to a music video to concert. I was fascinated by the whole process. And I remember I was 9 years old, and do bear with me though, because my age is a bit all over the place. But I must have been about 9 years old. And I remember the Brit Awards was such a big event in my house. My mum loved the Brits. And if anyone's listening, again, internationally, hello. The Brit Awards over here is like the Grammy Awards, England's Grammy Awards. It's quite prestigious. And it's a very, very flamboyant affair and massive production. And I remember I was sat on my living room floor and we had the big old telly boxes as well, big old TV. I remember, what was his name? Called out the Spice Girls. Spice Girls! And it was the first time I remember hearing Wannabe. And I wasn't too keen on Wannabe, I'm not going to lie, but everyone listened to it. But I was very much meh. I didn't really care for it. I was a little R&B baby. And then they came out on stage at the Brit Awards. And they'd done, this was 1997, yeah, 10, I was 10. And I remember I see ginger, sporty baby, scary, posh, and they flew into Who Do You Think You Are. Absolute iconic song, iconic. And it was the first proper time that I'd seen a performance. Looking back now, it's quite a dated performance. It was so simple, but it had so much punch, like, oh. And I remember sitting there in my little Mario Brothers pajamas, and I was like, wow, I want to be them. Like, I wasn't having any trans identity crisis, don't worry about that. But my pronouns are Ginger Spice. But I was watching them and I was like, wow, like this is incredible. Like, and having everyone cheer and the lights and dancing and just that whole different world. And that's the first time I ever got a taste for performing. And my mum encouraged it. She encouraged it massively. And I remember I went up to her and I was like, Mum, I want to start dancing. And back then, boys didn't dance. In the early 90s, it was very, well, to early to mid 90s, it was very much boys do boy things, girl do girl things. There was none of this fluid expression, none of this 20 different genders. There was none of it. And I said to her, I want to start dancing. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And my cousin Charlotte, she used to do disco dancing down at a school hall. And she was like one of my besties growing up. There's a 4-year age difference between us. And I had a lot of positive female role models, like my mum, my auntie Lou, my cousin Charlotte. Like, we were the squad, you know, growing up. Like, we had amazing Christmases. My auntie used to pick me up from school, and I used to spend a lot of time whilst my mum was working. She's a single mum working, like, God, in an off license in an office. Like, she did what she could to provide, and she made sure I had it. And I remember she took me to this disco dance at this school hall, and I walked in there, and there must have been about 20 or 30 girls. And I walked in there and we started doing like this little dance routine, and none of them really came near me. And it was my turn to go. Next thing you know, whilst I'm busting my best Mick Jagger across the school hall, they all started bursting out laughing. Every single little bitch. Every single little trashy Ann laughed at me doing my little pliés, and I ran out of that hall in absolute tears, and my mum had to run after me. And I said, I'm never going back again. I'm never going back again. And she said to me, she was like, you don't need to. She was like, you don't need to. She was like, you're you. She was like, you're a good dancer. Because I would make my family sit in front of that telly and watch me dance to Top of the Pops. Like, honestly, I would copy the routines. Janet Jackson as well, when she released Rhythm Nation, that was another one. I used to study Janet Jackson like there was no tomorrow. And then it was just, that's where my journey for creativity came from. But again, I was low in confidence because from an early age, I was kind of cast out from social events because I had ADHD. I was a camp kid, you know. I was quite a controversial child for the 90s and mid 90s, you know. But at the same time, I was a little shit as well. But I think that came from something deeper, of not being accepted by my peers and older peers, you know. So Zach did what Zach wanted to do, and I've always stood by that. But you know, my mum, my relationship with my mum is something I don't really talk about too much. She had her own demons from when she was younger, you know, and she always wanted the best for me, but she could see my dad in me. Now, my dad is not a nice human being. He's a very toxic, narcissistic man. And he may not be physical, he may not be anything like that in terms of abusive, but he's verbally and mentally, which to me, that does more danger to a kid and more harm um, than what physically would be. Because there's still stuff that my dad's done in the past that I'm still getting over, you know, or I'm still working with and trying to work through. But she could see me in him, and my dad was such a twat growing up, you know, massive twat. Um, and he would just compulsively lie. He would not pick me up from the supermarket to go me to spend the weekends with him. Like my mum would take me down to like Asda. I'm gonna go and take you to your dad's. We're meeting him at Asda. We'd be waiting at Asda for an hour and a half and he'd never turn up. And I used to remember my mum shouting down the phone at him like, "You're letting him down. You're this. You're that." So he's always been a bit of a waste of space. And I think that tribute to how I behaved either, you know, because I used to question myself, like, why doesn't my dad love me? Like stuff like this. So I used to take it out on my mum. Like I used to go back at her, used to have like physical fights. Like I used to scream and shout, and my mum had a bad temper, and then before you know it, I'd have a fist in my face. Like we're not talking like slaps, we're talking like punches. Now people will be like, "Oh my god, outrage!" But back then, you know, you could hit your kids. You know, you could hit your kids, but she never done it. Although justifying now, trying to justify hitting your kids nowadays wouldn't happen, but back then it was different. Like we're talking nearly like what 25 years ago. Like back then it was different. Like our grandparents used to get caned at school, you know. I used to push her to her limits, you know. I used to push her to her limits and see how far I could push her buttons. And it just like it was like I was that level of toxic because it filtered from my dad, and my dad was a massive trigger for her. She couldn't stand him. So the older I got, like the worse our fights would get. Like I'd never hit her. She used to like hit me, but it was very much what's it? It was very much, how can I say it? I would say there was good reasons. She had justification too, but she's like, I get my temper from my mum. So the older I've got, I've realised once you start, you can't stop. And that's where it was getting dangerous. Um, like my auntie used to get phone calls. My mum would be like, I'm going to end up killing him. She's like, I'm going to end up killing him. But my mum, bar that, she was one of the most incredible women. She really was. She had a heart of gold. She had a heart of gold. I was her boy, you know, and it was she looking back now, you don't realize how much your parents do for you and how right they are. And I remember her saying, "You're gonna be like your dad growing up. You're gonna end up with no one. You're turning into a horrible little bastard." And I was. She was right. I was. But I was rebelling, you know. I'd been outcast from such a young age for being myself in terms of I was I was a friendly kid. I was a very friendly kid, you know. And like I'd want to play with everyone, I'd want to get everyone included, but I had so much rejection because I was different, you know. I had so much rejection because I was different. So I think it's like a villain origin story, you know. It's like a villain origin story. And looking back now, I don't regret anything because I wouldn't be on this incredible journey that I'm on at the moment, you know. Um, so having the turbulent relationship I had with my mum and the non-existent relationship I had with my dad, that goes back to my escape as a kid. So come primary school and stuff like that, I'd always be doodling, I'd always be writing, I'd always be singing, I'd always be dancing. Like music really was my first love and my first passion. We'll take it back. After that Spice Girls performance, that was it. It was like crack. It was like crack. I was like, this is what I want to do. So once I realised the love that I had for music and performing, it really was like a domino effect. It was a domino effect. I started to search for more bigger productions. I started to experiment with sounds and find other sounds, you know, and I used to like rock. I found rock music and I was like like the music would connect with my mood. Like think of it like a plug. You're looking for the right plug for the plug socket, you know, or the cable to plug into the back of your speaker, which is your brain. So I used to connect with it, and how music used to make me feel, it would be like an out of body. It's hard to explain. It would be like an out of body experience, and you could close your eyes and you could picture a different world, you know, your imagination. Like, I had such an imagination as a kid. Like, I could close my eyes and I could go anywhere I want and it would feel like I was there. And I always used to end up on stage in my imagination. And you know, when you get people that say performing for Wembley Stadium in your shower, I was performing for Wembley Stadium. I was performing at the Chinese Theatre Show, Madison Square Gardens, you name it. I was there, stood right next to Ginger Spice, giving my best. Who do you think you are, girl power? Yes, God. You know, so it really was an escapism for me. And then over time, the older I got, I didn't connect with the music that connected with me. I connected again with music that other people were listening to. So let's fast forward to secondary school, and this is where it all went wrong. So obviously, back in primary school, I had a turbulent relationship with my mum, my parents, the kids at school, because I was a little bit different, you know. So I was massively bullied for being different and being gay. And it was a daily thing. And so come secondary school, this was like a new start. And it was very much, it was literally like Mean Girls. Like, pick your squad, stay there from year 7 to 11, and don't say boo to a goose, you know, or just follow the crowd. And I didn't have a crowd to follow. Again, at secondary school, it was my first day at secondary school. God damn you, Hev. My first day at secondary school. Listen, my mum always wanted to make sure I had everything I needed, yeah. My first day at secondary school was the worst day of my life. So the night before, I was in like a Renaissance Phoenix from the Ashes era. Like, this was a new chapter for Zach. Yeah, this was a new chapter for little Zach. So I was like, I'm going to have a makeover. And 2 weeks before, I just had braces fitted. So already I'm looking like fucking Nina from Finding Nemo. You know, fishy, fishy.
Fishy! Wake up!
And I was like, Mum, want to bleach my hair. And she was like, what? I was like, I want to dye my hair. She was like, all right. Now, my mum really was supportive of me expressing myself. Like, she supported me. She just let me, like, I've always experimented with like fashion and style and stuff like that. Like, for example, there was a time in year 6, we had our year 6 leavers school disco. And my mum gave me £40 to go down to TK Maxx. And she was like, right, go get whatever you want. So I was like, all right then. So I went to TK Maxx. I got some smart trousers, black school trousers, if you will, and this beige, turquoise and brown zigzag suede Chanel velvet type shirt. It was fucking hideous. It was disgusting. With these black trousers, obviously completely didn't go. And made my mum, I wanted flares, always wanted flares, like ABBA. Always wanted flares. And this, when you put music and fashion together and you can create essentially like a character or a performance, that's what I used to do. I used to be like, I want it like ABBA, you know, in the Waterloo. Is it the Waterloo video that they got the flare? I can't remember one of their videos, but you know, like that ABBA style flares. And everything in music and fashion would be like a gateway. So like, think like go back to the Spice Girls with their platform shoes, you know, and the platform shoes would be linked to like, you'd find out an era. So platforms are from the 60s, and then you'd look into the 60s, and then you'd see all these amazing outfits and razzmatazz, you know. So everything new that I found was like new and fresh in my head. Like, it opened another door to another like old school trend or something. So I was like, Mum, I want some flares to go with his trousers. So she cut out a pink bit of fabric from an old t-shirt and a purple one. And she cut triangles in the side of the leg and she made homemade flares. Then it came to the hair. The hair. Let's talk about the hair. So I had like a bowl cut. It was quite a long bowl cut. And I wanted Scary Spice hair, you know, where she had it in like the bandeau knots. And instead, my mum's friend's daughter, Gabrielle, came over and she sectioned my hair into squares. And I had mini ponytails with fluorescent pink, lime green, yellow, you name it. If it was fluorescent, it would be on my head. And I had little ponytails. It literally, you know, like you know, like the hair dye caps when you do highlights. That my hair looked like that. Anyway, she sent me packing to the school disco, and yeah, that's the perfect example of what an extrovert child I was. And then come secondary school, that was it. I wanted to go in my makeover, my Phoenix from the Ashes era. I wanted to dye my hair, and I'd had my ear pierced as well, but I'd got these braces, and braces were either cool or even not. It depends what kid you were. So anyway, waffling on, I dyed my hair blonde. Yeah. Blonde, was it? Blonde. You want to talk about blonde hair? Listen, it was orange. Orange as the day.
Girl, look how orange you look, girl.
I don't know what the fuck it was, but it was a mess. I thought I looked the shit. It was at the time when Eminem dropped his first LP, so obviously all the boys had bleached blonde hair, but I had long hair, so I just looked like a little lesbian because I had such a pretty face when I was younger. I always used to get asked if I was a boy or a girl. It was fucking traumatic. And anyway, we've gone to the sports shop, and before Sports Direct, which is like a budget sportswear shop over in England, if you're listening internationally. And it was called the Donne shop at the time, which is like a really cheap brand. Anyway, she took me there, got school bags. Now, most of the cool kids had your drawstring Nike bags. You'd have like a really cool pencil case. Listen, I swear at this point, my mum had enough of my shit because she literally bought a holdall that was big enough for a 2-week all-inclusive in the fucking Maldives. Let me tell you this now. So she's going, you're going to need it. You're going to need it. You are going to need it for your books. You're going to need it for this. So I was like, all right, I trust my mum's judgment. Anyway, I got there. No one had a fucking school bag. They had the cool drawstring ones. And there's me, this 15 stone, fat little kid with bright orange hair, braces, campus tits. I was just asking for it on my first day. Do you know what I mean? This massive bag, the school was heaving. People were pushing into my bag, catching on my bag. I fell on the floor. And then it all got overwhelming for me. So I went to go, and there was like stairs to the school reception area. I went to go up the stairs. I fell in front of everyone during lunchtime on my first day of secondary school. And secondary school for me, this is where it started to change in my life a little bit. So the bullying got worse. And I didn't really have any friends in secondary school. I sort of just floated between cliques, you know, and I was like finding myself. But drama was my favourite lesson. Drama and music were my favourite lessons. And the teachers always used to say to my mum, like, he excels in this. All my other subjects I was shit at. Actually, tell a lie, I was really good at English literature and English, but all the others I didn't really care about. And I'm very much that person that if only God can do, only God can do. Like, if you tell me I need to do it, I probably won't do it. You know, I've got to have I'm a passionate person. I'm a very deep thinker. I'm a very emotional thinker. And I think over my childhood and my teenage years, having so many people dictate different things to me really messed up my head, because again, it goes back to having ADHD. When you're not diagnosed, it gets very confusing. So I was very confused at the time. You know, I had people telling me my sexuality in secondary school. I had in my childhood, people telling me not to walk a certain way because I was walking like a girl. We call it a mince. I was sashaying. So I was very much growing up to be a people pleaser, you know. And everyone used to take the piss out of me for singing, and then musical theatre. And I was just like, I was just miserable. I was miserable, you know, and I was an easy target. I was a huge easy target. I was a scapegoat for everything. I always got in trouble, right? But 9 times out of 10, it wasn't me. But I used to say it was because I used to think that was what people wanted to hear. So if I got accused of something, they'd be like, Zach, was that you? And I'd be like, yeah, because I'd think that they wouldn't believe me, you know. And I used to tell like tall tales when I was a kid as well. So it probably stems from that. Looking back on paper and stuff, I really didn't do nothing wrong. I used to just say it to please the adults, you know, because so many people used to say I wasn't good enough or I was too that, lower this, lower that, don't do this, do that, you know. So I was always trying to constantly please my elders and not my peers. And then come secondary school, mine and my mum's relationship was probably the worst it has ever been, because we didn't communicate. So what was going on at school, I would take back home, you know, and she wouldn't understand whilst I was this. It came across like I was being this awful teenager. And anyway, I started hanging around with the wrong crowd. Must have been about 13 at this time, and I was going to flats of lads that were like 21 popping pills. I wasn't popping pills, they were. I was completely oblivious. But that was the first time I'd ever kissed a guy. His name was Jay. And he was this skanky 21-year-old chav. Bearing in mind I was 13 at the time. And me and my friend used to go up there. And looking back now, it's terrible. It is terrible. But at the time, you think you're dead cool, didn't you? Like, we've all done it, all of us. We think we were so cool. Now, that was the last straw for my mum, because she was like, I can't do this. I can't cope with him. Like, and she was dealing with her own stuff as well. Like, her mental health wasn't great, you know. So she sent me up to my dad's, and I remember I went to go and stay at her friend's, and she packed all my stuff, and she was like, "This is it." She's like, "I can't do it anymore. I genuinely can't do it." So I went to stay at her friend's overnight, and she had a lodger. And I had to stay in the same room as this lodger, because the lodger that she had at the time was her husband's best friend. So she trusted him. He came back home drunk, and I was in bed, like sleeping. Well, there was like 2 single beds, and he was a very like big, burly butch man. I'd woke up to him getting into my bed, and I'm not going to go into too much detail. Something happened and I was touched, and he said to me, "If you tell anyone, I'm going to kill you." My head was all over the place, and at this point, the next morning, the social worker was coming to pick me up to go and take me to my dad's. My mum just thought I was this out of control teenager. The social worker picked me up the next morning, took me up to my dad's, and by this point, I was just like numb throughout everything I'd gone through at school. Like, up until this point, like, everything was just spiraling. So the creativity took a back seat. There was no music, nothing. Like, everything I was loving or had loved was getting taken from me, you know. My mum, my childhood home, my friends, and I had no choice. I had no say in it. So I gave up everything I loved, you know. And then I went up to my dad's, and I was like sat on this like secret with what happened at my mum's friends. I get a phone call 2 days later, and my mum's screaming at me down the phone, "Oh, you're this, I can't believe you fucking done this." I was like, "What have I done?" So the guy, my mum's friends, had been stealing money off my mum's friend, and he'd said he'd caught me doing it. I think that was like collateral for him, and for also, if I did speak out about what he did to me, that would have been collateral. So everyone would have doubted me, you know. And I've never really told anybody that before. And it's just something that put to the back of your mind and forget about and crack on. Then moving up to my dad's, my dad had just married a wicked stepmother. And they were planning on having a kid. They'd only been married for like a few months. And I was like rebelling at this point. I went to WH Smith's and I stole some books and exchanged them for some cigarettes, if you will. And that was it. And then they were having a massive...
Oh! He's stealing!
And I'd only been up there for 2 weeks. He goes to me, right, you need to pack your stuff. We're going to go and see a guy. We're going to talk to this guy from social services. He goes, just go along with whatever I say. Or just agree with it and I'll get you a McDonald's or I'll give you 20 quid after. Like, my dad's love language is money. So I was like, all right, fair enough. Anyway, we got to this office. It was like a house, but offices. And we got into this office, sat down, done all our meetings and greetings. Hi, hi, hi. And he sat there and he was going, so Zach, do you know why you're here? Like, you know, your dad's contacted us. And I thought it was about the shoplifting. So I was like, right, I'll just go along with what dad says. So anyway, sat there and he started to ask my dad questions. And then my dad's like, yeah, he's been biting his stepmom. He's been physically abusive to us. He was shoplifting the other day. Like, it's tough for us to cope. We can't have him. His mum can't have him. And I'm sitting there thinking, physically, what? Like, I'm looking at my dad. I'm thinking, you're lying. Like, you're lying. And he was like, yeah, like, he punched me yesterday. And he was like, and this is like a mark that he left. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing? And the guy looked at me and he was like, is this how it happens, Zach? And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, it is. And then my dad just like nodded at me and I was like, what's just happened? He was like, right, that's fine. Well, what we're going to do, we'll arrange an emergency foster placement. And I'm like, what's foster? I'm like, what? I came, like, my mum, my auntie and everyone, we're a good fucking family. We've got our issues like every other family, but we were a good family. I never had without. I was safe. You know, I was very loved. And, you know, I was the heir to the family dynasty, if you will. I was the firstborn. I was the brat, you know, and I just couldn't understand. I was like, what's going on? Anyway, it was the eve of, I can't remember which birthday. I think it was 14. It was the eve of my 14th or 15th birthday, and it was the 28th of October. My dad signed me over to social services and put me in foster care because I stole a book from WH Smith's and my stepmom couldn't cope with that. I know. And I remember I had my little duffel bag. And by this point, everything was back with my mum. You know, all my toys, all my photos, all my memories. I just had one little duffel bag. And I got put into this really nice posh house, and they were a lovely older couple, and they had some corgi dogs, and this was up in Harrogate, so it was very posh. And I'm like, oh, hello, Zach, hello, like, welcome to the family. And I'm like, I hated it. I'd already got a family. Like, bitch, you ain't my family. Obviously, I wasn't like that. I was like, thank you. I was very polite. I was a good teenager. I was very polite. I had manners. And she goes, oh, I hear it's your birthday tomorrow. Let's go and get you some bits. So I was like, okay, brill. Anyway, I got a Stephen King book because I like my Stephen King. And that was it. And did my dad come and bring me a card or a present the next day? Or come and see me? No.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
So I spent my birthday in foster care. From then on, it was just me against the world. It was literally me against the world. And there were no rules. There was no one to tell me no. There was no more being told not what to do. You know, there was nothing. And everything that I loved was taken from me. And anyway, I was only in foster care for like a week because they were looking for another placement for me because it was only temporary. So anyway, they were like, oh, we found you this home. It's a lovely place. You know, it's up in Telford. So I was moving further up north. Anyway, it turns out, I found out it was a children's home, and these two men in a Mercedes came to pick me up and escort me there. And I don't know these people. I don't know these people. I was given 40 quid for the journey. And I was just like, I had no contact with anyone. I just missed everyone, you know? And I remember we were stopped at a service station and I was just silent and I felt sick. I felt homesick. And what now? What do I do now? And if you close your eyes and just think of you looking up in a room and the room's getting bigger and bigger and the sounds are getting louder and louder, that's what it felt like. It felt like everything, I just felt like I was in this infinity space and I couldn't get out of it. I didn't know that. I think that's the first day that I properly matured and had thoughts where I was like, shit, it's just you now, boy. Like, your future and your destiny is in your hands now. Like, you can't fuck this up. And I'd never been around any naughty kids. I'd never been around any troublesome kids or anything like that, you know? So it was a very, very scary time because these are abused kids. These are kids that have been physically abused, sexually abused, mentally abused. These are kids that have done horrific things themselves, you know, like stabbing their brother or sister, and like these were the really misunderstood lost kids. And I remember I walked into the home and they all introduced themselves, and one of the kids now, Dan, love him, he follows me now. I'll probably be getting him on the podcast as well, but it was just a very scary time. And that was probably the day that changed my life and how I perceive things, all because my dad couldn't be bothered, you know, never stuck up for me, never fought for me, you know. He just rather have an easy life for himself than put a relationship in with his son. And at this point, my mum was doing her own thing, you know, she had her own shit to deal with as well. But he had told my family that I was in boarding school and he had paid for me to go to boarding school. So it wasn't until a couple of months that they found out that I was in a children's home. And then what was it? So I was in this children's home. And then, you know, fast forward to the people I met there, there was a child worker called Michaela. She changed it for me because she got me back into music massively. And for me, she just, that's where she bear with me. She introduced me to Bashment and Little Kim and all these new flavors of music, and she gave me rhythm. Like, she gave me rhythm. She gave me soul. She was one of my favorites. She was my favorite care worker in that children's home. Michaela was cool. She was cool, and she taught me a little head bop, you know. She taught me it all, and we used to like drive around and listen to the music, and she was like, it was like having a big sister. And I was like, do you know what, this ain't bad. And it takes one person to believe in you, and Michaela was the first person that ever believed in little Zach. She follows me on Instagram now, and I don't think she knows how much my light she began to make shine brighter, because she was one of the first people that believed in me. And I hold her very, very close in my heart and in my memories as well. And I hope that she'd listen to this too. Like, I do, because I'm still that kid at the Coppish, which was what the home was called. And for me, I was in awe of her because she was just cool, you know, and she bent the rules. She bent the rules for me and only me as well. And I just felt accepted by this really cool person. And then Mystique. Let's talk about the girl band Mystique and Alicia Dixon. Alicia Dixon is the reason that I started.
Time, showtime, hook line, let's roll, let's ride.
A lot of people don't know this. So they were like a big thing for me. I loved them growing up. Loved garage, loved Alicia's rapping. She was cool at the time. She still is cool now. Justice for Alicia Dixon. Anyway, I used to sit in my room and I'd have my notepads and I used to write my own lyrics and I started MCing. Kayla would encourage it and she'd read it and I started writing from my experience and my relationship with my mum. Now you got this 14-year-old kid and I'm putting pen to paper and the stuff that was coming out was really good for someone of my age because I was tapping into my emotions and Michaela made me find my love for music again. She doesn't know this. And I put the pen to paper and then I just must have had about 20 A4 notepads, thousands of pages of different songs, lyrics, poetry. That was my outlet. And if it wasn't for Michaela, I would have lost myself with the naughty kids and I would have not tapped into it again. But she saw me. Then I came out because everyone knew I was gay. I got told I was gay before I even came out. So coming out for me was quite easy. And then I got homophobically attacked outside Telford Ice Rink. So again, that was me going back in my shell because I was petrified. And during all of this stuff that I've gone through as a kid, I never had 1 ounce of therapy or anything. My therapy was music. My therapy was closing my eyes and escaping into Wonderland. My therapy was creating different worlds, which is why I love creating. It's why I love creating. Because as a young kid, from just being young and having so many adults as well, so many adults tell you you're not good enough. You need to be humdrum. You know, you need to tone it down. You need to stop being so loud. You know, you need to be quiet. You need to not dance because it's not a boy thing to do. You know, I had a lot of identity crisis growing up and a lot of feeling like I was never good enough. Feeling like I was never good enough and I was never pleasing people. I felt like a spare part. Music saved Zach. Music definitely saved Zach. But creatively, it wasn't until, and it was the children's home I moved to down at my hometown, and this is where the growing pains began. So there was a girl, we'll call her Jasmine. There was a girl called Jasmine, and she was from a broken home. She had abusive parents, and moving from Telford back to my hometown was probably the worst thing I could have done at the time because, again, I stopped creating again and started experimenting with drugs. And we used to go down the back of the fields behind the children's home and do aerosol cans. And I never used to smoke. Well, I smoked when I was like 14 and I used to have a fag, but I never used to do like other drugs like weed and stuff. I was quite a good geeky kid. So I must have been about 16 at this point, and I was doing aerosols every day for months. My lips would crack. I set myself on fire. I was hurting. Because I was craving my family. And at the time when my family wanted me to sort myself out, they were just watching me in this downward spiral and hearing that I was on this downward spiral, but they couldn't intervene because they were protecting themselves and their family, you know. But the reason I was is because I craved it. Like, we were having Christmas I didn't have Christmas with my family, and Christmases were one of my favourite times because we had the best ones. You know, my mum's Christmas dinners slapped; they were banging. Oh, she was a good chef. Hev was a good chef. But I was hurting. I couldn't understand. So I was like, I had that fuck it attitude. Like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I'm going to do what I want, you know? And the only person I was hurting was myself. So I started doing aerosols and with this girl, Jasmine, like to the point where we were just inebriated. Like we were hallucinating everything. It was very dangerous. And then I still did all my studies. Still got all my GCSEs, passed with flying colours. Like, no matter how much of a rebel I was being and off the rails I seemed, I used to manage to wing it. You know? And people never understood it. They were like, how the fuck does Zach do it? How does he do it? And the universe was just on my side. And I had no guidance. I had no plan. Then I got accepted into college, theatre school. And that's where things started to change. And I was like, I love this. You know, I got my first standing ovation from performing in Chicago, not the Chicago, we're talking like college Chicago. And I stopped doing the aerosols and started to nurture my voice and start playing with the pen again, and it came back. So I'd always dipped in and out of creative stuff, you know. And I started to meet boys, and then I discovered London. And yeah, London for me was a wild time. I could sit here now and talk about every single scenario that's happened. There's been so many stories. I'm gonna have to do this in chapters. I literally am gonna have to do this in chapters. Like, I'm gonna have to like feed you like chapters in life, you know, because I can't fit it into one episode. Like, it's crazy. So London was like razzmatazz for me. I feel like everything that I've set out to do today, in today's world, as adult Zach, grown Zach, spiritually free Zach, happy Zach, genuine Zach, and authentic Zach. Like, I'm just Zach, and I'm proud to be Zach. You know, there's nothing I would ever change. There's nothing there's nothing, looking back of everything I've been through, the people I've met, whether they're good or bad, like, to get to this point and have a relatively successful, because I don't like to blow smoke up my own arse. I put a character on sometimes and act all sassy and bougie. But that's, I'm actually quite chill. But I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I am so proud of the person and the people I have in my life, and I treasure them. And to be able to be my own creative boss, and just to be me, and not give a shit about being accepted now, and just embracing it. And I've got such a different mindset, you know, whereas there's kids that I know now that I lived with that are addicted to crack. Some are not with us anymore. Everyone's life path is different. And it could have gone the other way for me. And there's so many more layers to me, and my story and my life. Like, I don't really know where to start. I don't really know where to start, you know. But yeah, my path could have been a lot different. And at the moment, you know, I'm just following the yellow brick road. And when I get to Oz, to those who said I couldn't do it, I fucking did it, bitch. Listen, this has been the first episode. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. It's just more like a little introduction because I'm saving the juicy. Well, like I've got ADHD, so to do a podcast is quite a task for me as well. Because I don't know if you've listened, you probably think, what the fuck is he going on about? We were literally talking about creativity and then fucking childhood trauma. But I hope the dots connected, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Follow me on TikTok, Zach the Brat, where you can find more of my crazy lives. But also this podcast is so you guys can get to know me better. A bit of an understanding of how my brain ticks. But it's not always going to be doom and gloom. We're going to have a bit of gossip on this podcast. We're going to be having some fun as well. This is just more like a introduction to a small snippet of my early life and early Zach. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.